You know, it's important for us to remember just what Joyce said there, that it doesn't run in our family. You know, we have things, traits and things like that, but that God is for us and not against us, and that He is there in all things. It just really keeps registering with you this morning, that we need to really be reminded, even as we leave today, that it doesn't run in our family.
Amen.
Unless it's good, and then it can run in our family. We can take the good that run in our family, and the bad, that's from your side of the family. Well, we are in year 19 of David. We have been on a long journey with David. We've got today and one more week of David. I'm going to close it off. We've left a lot of things in the story out, but because it's a big story. It's a lot. It's one of the few characters that we see so much from start to finish of his life. Him being king, he gets a lot written about him. We've been taking a lot of the lesson from Samuel, but just to note, if you're not a Bible scholar, the story is also in Chronicles. Chronicles is kind of an overview of it, so we've been talking more out of Samuel because it goes a little more in detail. But there is, I challenge you to read both counts because there's some stuff in both. It's just good stuff. It's good stuff. And then when we're done with David, we're going to flip the script, I guess you could say. We're going to jump over and talk about the true king, the king that all this has been shadowing and symbolic of. We're going to talk about Jesus, and we're going to talk about a bunch of things that he is as our king. But before we get there, we're going to talk about David. Today's story and David's going to be a little, it's going to be a little interesting. Let's just say that. We're going to, it's as we have seen in this, and hopefully I've been able to communicate that David was not perfect. David had ups and David had downs, just like us. That David was not sinless and flawless, but the key in David is what he did when he made those mistakes. We saw what King Saul did when he made mistakes and how he handled his mistakes. And then we've been able to see what David did when he made mistakes, the big mistake, the, premeditated murder, adultery David. He doesn't get introduced as that. He gets introduced as the David and Goliath killer and the harp player, the psalm writer. We don't introduce him as David, the adulterer, murderer, premeditated, in the wrong place at the wrong time, David. But that is a portion of his story. The great thing about that is we can learn from David also that mistakes do not define our life. David made mistakes. He did not live in those mistakes. Let's just put it that way. He did not let those mistakes dictate who he is. Like I said, when we talk about David, we don't even usually talk about those things. And so today, we pick up a little farther down the road. Last week we talked, like I said, about Bathsheba and that situation. And hopefully we've learned in all of that David repented. Now we're going to skip down the road a little ways and give you kind of a state of the union. We're going to be in Samuel, I believe, 16. 2 Samuel chapter 16, in that area right in there. And what's gone on in this chapter and where we're at, to fast forward, his son has declared war against him. And y'all are going, what? What did we miss? The armies that he used to lead in victory are against him. There's riots in the street. But David, instead of allowing the city and the nation to be ripped apart in civil war, he leaves the city. And so on his way out, 2 Samuel chapter 16 verse 6 comes up. And as he's leading out of town with a couple of his men, this guy starts to holler at him and make some stuff up, not make stuff up, but say things about him and says that, you're getting what you deserve. And when we trace this guy's history back, he comes from the tribe of Benjamin. Anybody remember the tribe of Benjamin? In case you're not familiar with the tribe of Benjamin, not Benjamin Whitehead's tribe, that'd be the Whitehead tribe now, currently. But what this guy, Saul, came from that tribe. And so there's a little bit of hard feelings here. This guy's got a little bit of a beef with David. As a matter of fact, he even states in there that you stole the kingdom. And we know from the lessons and the research we've done and the teaching and all that David didn't steal the kingdom. Saul gave the kingdom up because he wouldn't repent. He wouldn't do what God told him to. And so he forfeited that over. And God took it and gave it to David because that's what God can do because he's God. But the interesting part in here when we're going through this is this guy is just talking smack, throwing rocks and dirt, and just being ugly. And we find David in this story at a very low place in his life. The victorious giant killer is not quite feeling the same. He even states in there that maybe the guy probably, he should feel that way. Maybe it's what I deserve. And one of David's mighty men, and it's interesting that we remember back stories before that they watched how David led and how he treated the king that was an anointed king. Remember that? That he said, no, we're not going to kill him. And here's this guy talking smack, and he says, David, now, we got to remember the day and age that they're living in. This is not current. But he says, can I cut off his head? Now, you know, when somebody's talking smack or being ugly or being mouthy, we just say, hey, but he says, this guy is attacking the king. Can I cut off his head? I mean, that's pretty, you know, that might get better responses. The talk, smack talking might come down a little bit if you start cutting people's heads off. But he didn't. He said no. He wants to cut it off. Abishai's like, hey, let me cut off his head, because he never forgot who David was, even if David had forgotten who he was. He knew that he'd been anointed king. And he knew that this is not how you treat the king. You see, David was a great leader and warrior, but he was not so great at being a dad. And we're going to look a little into that. Matter of fact, there's some things that he does as dad that's, well, we're going to go there. But I want us to understand that looking at last week, we learned about God's grace. When we repent, when we fall before the Lord, when we acknowledge our mistake and our sin, God's grace. And that's what God wanted Saul to do, and Saul never did it. We learned that God doesn't hold that against him. He doesn't hold what David did against him. Now, where we sit currently, I want us to a few things I want you to see. David has 8 wives. Everybody say 8 wives.
8 wives.
He probably not remember the anniversary of all of his wives on all of those. That's why we have, one. Keeps it narrowed down, easy to remember the anniversary. But 8 wives, 8 anniversaries. And the names of some of these women are interesting. We'll just put it that way. They weren't Tiffany, Michelle, Barbara, it's Hagatha. Would you like the name? Does anybody have a family member named Hagatha? Before I say anything about Hagathas. Just checking. I'm not going to talk about the name Hagatha. But between these 8 wives, he has 20 sons and 1 daughter. Poor girl. Could you imagine being the girl with 20 brothers? Yeah. I bet she played a lot of cowboys and Indians and spears. And I bet the boys didn't play a lot of dress up. Bathsheba has Solomon. That's a son we all know. We know the connection. We know from last week's story that she lost a son before that. So that's a famous one, and we'll talk more about him next week. We're going to talk about Absalom. And Absalom has a sister, the only sister, named Tamar. Not tomorrow, tomorrow. Tomorrow. We're going to do it tomorrow. And now another son named Ammon. He was the firstborn. And what do we know from a little bit of history? Typically, not always, but usually the first son is what? In line to be king. That's the way they like to do it. Didn't always work that way, and we know, but that's typically the thinking. The firstborn son thinks that he's a little special anyway, because he's first. And so now the story picks up. And I promise you, this is in the Bible. I promise you. So the firstborn son, Ammon, to put it lightly, he's in love with his sister. And I know we're like, what? Yes, it's true. He and really probably the better terms is a lustful situation, not just in love. And so what he's doing is he's struggling with this and what he wants to do and with his sister and things of that nature. And he comes up with a plan. Let's just put it that way. And so he says that he's sick. And so dad goes in and says, "What's the matter, son?" And son says, "I'm sick." And he goes, "Okay, well, did you take the Jerusalem Pepto?" And he said, "Yeah, it's not working." And he goes, "Okay, well, what do you need?" And he goes, "You know what would make me feel better is if my sister would come and make them croissants and a little powder on it and feed me." Now, yeah, I don't know. I just, right off the bat, that should have been a red flag. When you got that gut feeling on the inside that's just something don't sound right, kind of lean into that sometimes. Listen to that. And David should have listened when his son said, "You know what would make me feel better is if my sister would come feed me." To do what? Get up and go outside. Forget this. You're not sick. Go to school. But David doesn't. And so David says, "Okay, sounds good. That'll make you feel better." As parents, sometimes we gotta have enough wisdom with our children. And David doesn't exercise that. And so she comes in, and throughout the story, to trim it all down, she's feeding him, and he feels this is his opportunity. And so what he does is he takes advantage of his sister and all that good stuff that entails. And so this is a situation in the Bible where the Bible addresses it. What we would call today is a rape. And that's what he does. He takes advantage of her. And to understand the magnitude of what that means, even in that day, because if we fast forward and we understand the situation with Mary and Joseph and her not being a virgin, that's a big deal back then. And so this is now gone. She's not having the ability to marry a man now because she's no longer a virgin. And not only is she a virgin, but the situation's worse because it's her brother. And that's like backwoods stuff that we talk about today. And this is just wrong on so many levels. The first thing is this is what happens when we do not address our thought process, sin, whatever it is. I'm assuming nobody in here has had this situation with their siblings, but we have issues with sin. And what he does not do is address the sin issue. When these thoughts came up, he should have addressed it, the brother, Ammon, and dealt with sin. But when we do not deal with sin, sin continues to grow like weed. And it multiplies. And so what he does is, after this, he feels guilty and wants nothing to do with his sister. Sister goes into a depression state because her life is just in turmoil. But the biggest problem in the whole situation is Dad. Dad does nothing about this situation. Now, we can look at situations as parents and look back and go, okay, I made a mistake here. Okay, I probably should have done this, because a lot of times as parents we're learning on the job. We might not have had good parents. We might be encountering situations today that our parents never even would dream of. And so we are learning how to parent on the way. But I'm just going to tell you, this one's a pretty easy answer. There's not a lot of confusion in how you handle this. David should have dealt with it. And the point of that is when we do not confront sin and we leave it alone, it will always come back to haunt us. Mm-hmm. It will grow, it will wait, it will sit dormant until the right season. And so what happens is the fact that he doesn't take care of it. 2 years go by. Everybody say 2 years. 2 years. None of us have ever held a grudge for 2 years in here, have we? Some of you are like, still? No. 2 years go by. And what happens is the brother, anybody know who the brother is? Absalom. Absalom has been brewing and brewing and brewing and brewing for 2 years, plotting his revenge. And so he throws a party at the house and has all the brothers come over. And they're sitting there and they're having a good time and talking about this and that and doing what brothers do, being silly and goofing around probably. And, one of the brothers probably stood up and said, hey, do you think I can eat this whole thing in one bite? Yeah, try it. All that goofy stuff. And then all of a sudden, Absalom snaps his fingers, and out of the shadows come the assassins and stab the brother to death. Now, I'm not a big party thrower, but I got to think that puts a really wet blanket on a party. Everything's going good till people start stabbing people, And so here's this party, everybody's having a good time, and probably one of the brothers is like, what did he say? Not knowing what, did he spill Kool-Aid on the carpet? Man, that's a heavy punishment. But that wasn't the case. Stabs him and kills his brother. And so now we see it nowadays on TV. What happens when people are at an event or a mall or something happens and somebody shoots? Everybody runs like ants, right? I mean, you can imagine everybody's having a good time, guys playing the harp, and brothers come out of the wow, start stabbing, and everybody's like out of here, shuffling, hiding under stuff, crawling out windows, not wanting to be next. And what happens in here is the messengers run to David and say, David, your sons are dead. And so David's shocked and sad. And then another messenger comes in and says, no, it's not all your brothers. It's just one brother. Son. Just one son. And so what happens here is David is now stuck in a situation because you just can't let your siblings kill each other. That's good parenting 101 right there. If you don't learn anything else today, go home and understand you just can't let your kids kill each other. I know it, but it's, I know that some of the siblings are probably like, well, I can understand. I've thought about it. Y'all, come on, y'all know it. But what happens in here is David is now confronted with, what do I do with Absalom? Now, we would like to think that he does the right thing, but he kind of does the wrong thing. Can you keep him in here? Do you not? And so he tells Absalom, you're going to have to leave, and so he leaves. And the problem is David didn't handle either situation right. Two wrongs don't make a right. They just make it wronger. But you didn't know that. Two wrongs make it wronger. You see, David didn't address the things when he should have. He let them go. He just kind of said, well, maybe. An important thing for us to understand with Ammon and Absalom is unaddressed issues. You see, you can't fix the hurt of being sinned against yourself. You can try, but only God can do that. That is something that you have to bring to God. And Absalom was angry and mad and had been done wrong, or felt that he'd been done wrong, and he was mad at his dad because his dad, he felt, didn't handle the situation right either. And in all of this, Absalom never did the thing that he should have done, which is go to God. Yeah. He instead let it brew for 2 years. 2 years. It is important for us to understand we cannot fix it. There are people who have sinned against us in our past. And I'm here to tell you, in the words of the Disney cartoon Frozen, you have to let it go. You see, because if you don't let it go, you will bleed on other people. You will carry that hurt, and in everything you do from there will carry on. It's like taking a straw and coating the inside of the straw with grease and then drinking your drink and not realizing that it's going to what? You're still going to get that. Son, it is gross, isn't it? Nasty. But it's true. And we think that we can put our hurts and our anger over here, and we'll put it in a compartment, in a box, and we'll just leave it alone, and we say we've forgiven, and we're over it, but we ignore it. And we ignore it. And we ignore it. Until something happens, and then boom! You killing all your brothers in the house. It's going to samurai on them. You know, somebody complains about your lemon meringue pie, and all of a sudden you go crazy. But you have to deal with these things. You cannot let them sit. It's also important for us to understand that you can't fix what has happened against you by doing it also. You can't fix the hurt by sinning against the person who hurt you and being mean to them. I'll show you. Those of us that have been married long enough know sometimes we fall in that rut when we're mad at a spouse. I'll show you. I'll put grease in your straw. Your favorite straw. And we would all admit that we don't do these things, but we do. We hold grudges. We don't go above and beyond. We don't serve because we don't like this person. We serve who and what we like. Because it's easy and it's comfortable, and I like this person, so I'm going to be super sweet and nice to them, and I'm going to do all this good stuff to this person. But you know what? I don't really like you because of what you did in 1962. And so I'm not going to be mean to you, but I'm not going to be nice to you.
Come on.
Because then I can still say, well, I don't have a grudge. We're just not friends.
Come on.
But when they walk in the room, what happens? We're looking for a sword to stab. There's some folk that you would kill right now if it was not illegal. If you could hide the body and nobody'd ever know, just between you and them, it'd be over. You might have a mom or a dad that did you wrong, a friend, a sibling, whoever it is. I want you to understand, you gotta let it go. You see, David sinned against his family by not dealing with the issues. This all happens because David doesn't handle it right. David didn't address his boy who wanted his sister to feed him. He should have smacked him right then and said, "What? No." And then when it did happen, he should have addressed that issue. And he didn't. And it just festered. And then when the other brother killed the other brother, this is a hot mess. Boy, you wouldn't think these were the king of Israel right here. You'd think this was... I'm not even going to say it. But this is like Jerry Springer stuff right here. Jerusalem Springer is what we got going on here. Brother slept with sister. Brother killed brother. Dad did nothing. Tomorrow on Jerry Springer... Same man also premeditated, it's just, this is the king. The man after God's own heart. Where is that part of the story? When are we talking about that? You see, Absalom won't forgive. He doesn't. Now, in Absalom's case, I'm not denying that David did it wrong, but he didn't trust his leadership. He didn't trust that David didn't do what he thinks he should have done. Maybe he thought that David should have taken him out and killed him right then and there. Because what he would have done is he would have never been happy with what David did. Now, what happens also in here is there's all kinds of hot messes. I mean, it's a hot mess. I mean, the family, this is not where we thought we would be 40 years later from David and Goliath. I mean, we started this story looking good. The anointing is on him. He's not cutting stuff in the bathroom with Saul, not cutting his little jacket and all that. I mean, we started this thing right. And the king, remember going down and getting the ark, David? Remember that guy? Remember the one that said, we're not going to do anything without the presence. We need the presence of God. And somewhere along the road, we drifted from seeking the presence to premeditating murder and adultery. And the kids is running wild and killing each other and sleeping with each other. I mean, it's a hot mess. Sounds like the church today. Not our church. Just generally speaking. I'm not clarifying any of that. It's why we did not hand out swords this morning. You know what? If you got to beat with somebody today, today is the day to do it. Hand out the pool noodles. So some of y'all be. And in this, you know, sometimes you just would think we were making this stuff up. Joab is the general. He's the right-hand kind of man. And Absalom keeps sending him text. Hey, talk to my dad. I really want to come back. You know, maybe this living out here, you know, and it's funny because, you know, he's living like David did. But see, David was anointed king. David had the presence of God. Absalom's out there. I don't like this not living in the palace thing. You know, this is not cool. Sleeping on rocks. And ask Dad if I can come back. And he's like, no. He's not even answering the text. And he's got the little ding read by. So he knows that he's getting the text. He knows that he's just not responding. So what do you do if somebody's not responding to you? Maybe you go talk to him. No. What does Absalom do? He goes and burns down his house and all the animals that they've got. Now I will tell you, that will get your attention. I can only imagine him coming home and, ooh, somebody's place is burning. And as he gets closer to the house, he's like, that's my house. And I'm sure, you know, he stuck a little note said, call me, Absalom. And I'm sure he said, hey, dude, you burned my house down. That gets, once again, not recommending this. This is not what you should be doing when somebody's not answering your text. Please don't burn down their house. But Absalom did. And I guess it worked because it did get his attention. And he did talk to David. And David does allow him to come back in. Now, a lesson in this is, if you're going to punish, punish. If you're going to forgive, forgive. But don't kind of do either. Don't half-heartedly do it. Well, because what happens is he comes back and then David just acts like he's never there. If you're going to punish, punish. If you're going to live out in the rocks and be out, you know, exiled, then be exiled. If you're going to forgive, then forgive. Then don't say, I'm forgiving and letting you back in the house, but I'm not talking to you. I'm going to act like it, but I'm going to act like you still did it. But I've forgiven you, because that's what I got to do. But my response and my fruit and my actions do not show that. And so that's what David's doing. He's like, okay, I'm going to let you back in the house, because, man, if he's Absalom burned down your house, I don't even burn down the palace. And so he does. He lets him back in. And there's a thing called King's Court. And what happens is you would bring it's kind of like small claims court before King's Court. And you could bring grievances. You could say, you know, my neighbor built a fence on my property and it came over on my line a little bit and we really need to, and so you go to the judge and the judge would go and he would decide what would happen. This is the way it is. And every once in a while, a bigger situation, you could go and it was called King's Court and you actually got sent before the king and make your grievance known and go, hey man, he built a bigger fence. It's taller, I can't see it. You know, they have wild parties over there. I'm done with all this. And so what Absalom did, as Absalom is still not over the situation, Absalom sits outside where King's Court would be. And he's sitting in his shiny gold chariot that the king's kids get to drive, you know, the fancy one. And as people would come up and stand in line waiting to go to King's Court, he'd say, hey, Bill, man, what are you doing here? Well, you know, them guys down there, they keep cutting down my trees, and I've about had it, so I'm gonna come to King's Court and see if David would settle this matter. And he goes, man, I can't believe, hey, you want to sit up in the chariot? Come on up in here. Sit in the chariot. Man, wow, this is a nice chariot. This is better than my old wagon. Man, you got a nice chariot. Yeah. Just stand up there for a minute. You want me to take a picture of you in it? Hold on. Let me take a picture of him in Absalom's fancy, shiny chariot. And he'd say, you know what? If I was king, I'd settle this matter. I'd make this go away like that. I'd easily man, I can't believe you might not even get to see King. You know, David's always busy. He might not even get to see you today, but I can guarantee you, if I was king, I would handle this. This would be done. I can't believe they're down there cutting your tree down. And then somebody else would come in, hey, Barbara, what are you doing here? Well, you know, the line is just so long down at the well. I was hoping that the ladies keep cutting it. Maybe there could be some better rules and order down there. Well, you want to sit in my chariot? Why don't you stand in the chariot? You know, if I was king, I would take care of the situation. So what Absalom does is he begins to sow seed in people's minds that if I was king, this is how I would do it. If I was king, I would give you what you wanted. Oh, if I was king, I would think about your needs. If I, boy, do we ever hear that in the Bible? If I was in charge. If I was God. If I. And so Absalom sows seed, and as much as the children of Israel love King David, people are fickle and they forget quickly. And remember, what got us into the whole situation was they wanted a king, and they wanted one that looked right, looked the part, looked pretty, and held his stuff just right, and that's what they wanted. And so the more they start to hear and talk about, hey, I heard that Absalom said that if he was king, we'd all get free stuff. I heard he'd paint gold roads and we'd all get a beautiful chariot. And before you know it, this word spreads about how great Absalom would be if he was king. And all along, Absalom is letting anger, you see, because now he's angry at his dad. And he's plotting to overthrow the anointed king of Israel. I guess they edited out of the history books what happened to Saul, because he should have known better. See, he wanted to be king, but he was not anointed king, but he doesn't care. And so what he asked David to do is he says, hey, I'd like to take the men out and do a sacrifice. And so he takes the armies out. And when he gets out of the city, he splits the armies up, and the armies divide up and go to the towns. And you know what they do? They tell everybody, David is no longer king. So they come into, like here, they would come into Belleville and make the declaration, the army did, that Absalom is now king. David is no longer king. It's amazing how things can shift when we don't get what we want. And how quickly things can shift when not only do we not get the things we want, but we hear what we would like. Ooh, this is what I would like. Oh, this is how the kingdom would be. Remember, even when Saul took over, that he even told him, this is what's going to happen. Your kids are going to have to join the army. It's going to cost you more money for all of these things. We can do it my way or we can do it your way, but this is the price. Yeah, well, yeah, okay, whatever. We want a king. And so here it is. Not looking good. And so David leaves with his mighty men, his inner circle that has always been with him. Because if there's one thing David loved, was Israel and Jerusalem. And he would rather leave in this moment than see the city fighting against each other and destroying itself. Absalom takes the throne, and as he takes the throne, he gets this idea. You see, in the leaving, not everything left. And there were some concubines that were left in the palace. And so the concubines, I use this word, they belonged to David. And I use it, obviously I'm not saying that that's just the term and what it was. And so what Absalom does at this point, he gets this wild idea. And he goes and puts a tent on the roof. Probably the same roof where he sinned against God and saw Bathsheba. And so what he does is, he goes and he takes these 10 concubines on the same rooftop where David had sinned, and he rapes these 10 women. It's good family right here. Glad, as Joy said this morning, it doesn't run in my family. But it's interesting, when we do not deal with sin, he became what he despised. The story started that he was so angry because somebody had raped, his brother had raped his sister. And here he does the same exact thing to 10 women. It shows us what sin does when we do not address it. Now, this is a big thing. I mean, we're all like, well, none of us in here, hey, whoa, okay, yeah, that's a big deal. I mean, we're all sin does this. I know nobody in here is dealing with this situation, but what sin are we harboring? What sin are you allowing to grow? You see, because Absalom didn't deal with it, and it ended up destroying him. And as we've said several times throughout this whole teaching on David, that sin takes us farther than we ever thought we would go. Here is Absalom just overthrew his dad, kicked him out of the kingdom, and has raped 10 women on the rooftop of the palace in front of God and everybody to declare how much he is the man. Just think of that. Just saying that. Now, the Bible does tell us about Absalom. He was a good-looking man. Persuasive with the words, apparently. Letting everybody sit in the chariot. But he became what he hated. And it was not an overnight process. He didn't wake up one next morning and boom, he's evil. But he allowed anger and sin and these things to just brew in his heart. And instead of addressing them and dealing with them, and for some reason, that didn't run in the family. He didn't learn from what his dad had done. Because we talked about last week, David repented. Created me a clean heart. Man, there ain't no created me a clean heart with Absalom. There's created me, let me cut your heart out. It is important for us to understand major things like this or minor things. The magnitude of the sin, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's some huge major issue like this or if it's some small thing. God is the one that heals. You see, a lot of times we hold on to these things and we have these issues from our past, from friends or spouses or parents. And the reason we can't be healed, and as I say that, before you get, God can heal everything. There are things in your life God can't heal. Because you won't let him. He can heal anything except for the thing that you keep hidden in your hand, in your heart, that you don't want to share, and you don't want to talk about it. And you don't, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. Don't bring out no swords. God can only heal what we will open up and share and expose to him. And say, God, I am dealing with this. I do not like this. And we might not get the answer from God we like. That's the hard part. Sometimes that's why we won't take it to God. Because God might just tell us something that we don't want to hear. What we usually do when we want to take our grievance to the Lord or we've been done wrong, God, they did me wrong. They've hurt my feelings. They offended, whatever it is. Not denying that it's not true. They did me wrong. Open up the ground and swallow them up, God. Vengeance is yours, Lord. Go get it. Come on. Right now. And God says, how about you love him? Excuse me. That's what you said. I needed to love him. Yeah. Love him. Whatever loving them is, I'm not telling you what you're supposed to do in that scenario. Unfortunately, we usually can imagine what it means. And maybe God doesn't. But we're all scared that he's gonna. I hate this person. I hate him. Seat's always empty next to him when you go somewhere.
Come on.
We're going home. Why? There's a seat right there, Mom. No. My fangs will come out. You know. I know none of y'all have been there. That's probably only me speaking. None of y'all have ever dealt with that. None of y'all have ever pulled in somewhere and looked at the cars. Let's get there early. Let's get there late so we don't have to see such and such. I'm not going to the family reunion because Billy Bob will be there. And we know what Billy Bob does. when I was just a little one, Billy Bob, blah, 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 and spilt my cherry pie, and I've never liked him since. In the story, Absalom is king. But you see, it's important to understand that even when David is in his weak moments, he has men to lift him up. His mighty men pick up the slack, I guess you could say. They still support him. They overtake the city because they always knew who was king. David. It didn't matter who was sitting on that throne, and they were going to go get that throne back, because we may have did this the first time with Saul, but we ain't doing it the second time with this cuckoo. I'm sure that somewhere deep down inside, David didn't want to kill his son. I mean, who wants to kill their kid, right? Don't raise your hands, please. But think about that. No matter what your kid did, how bad it would be, I mean, he killed his other kid. I mean, this is a hot mess. But David doesn't want to kill his sons. But now, his mighty men, his assistants, who've seen his son do these things to their king, they got a little different feeling about it. They ain't so, no, it's okay. And so as they overtake it, Absalom in the midst of the fightings, and he gets on his horse and his chariot, he's leaving. And the race is on. And I can just imagine they're going, ooh, just let me get my hands on it. And in the midst of all this, the Fabio hair is just flapping in the wind as he's riding, escaping. This is beautiful. This is why you don't have long hair. Just right here. So in the midst of all that, he gets hung on a low branch, and he's stuck. And David's mighty men show up, and they pierce him with 3 spears. And then they continue to kill him, stab him. And so here's Absalom, born in the palace, dying, hanging in a tree, being stabbed. This is not the way he thought it would go. So often in our life, this is not how we thought it was going to go. If he was writing his own script, I don't think it would have been, I'm going to kill my brother. I'm going to stab my brother, have him killed. I'm going to overthrow my dad because I'm going to be king. But God hasn't anointed me to be king, and I'm going to die and be stabbed and die a brutal death, similar to Saul. It's amazing to see the differences in these men who were not willing to submit and serve and repent to God, and how their end comes. It's so important for us to understand the wages of sin is death. We cannot avoid that. It's the way it works. That's why it is so important for us to repent, You see, it's important. A lesson we can learn from David is that David sinned, but he repented. Absalom was hurt, and he rebelled. David repented. Absalom rebelled. Absalom was not happy with the way it was being done, so he rebelled. Brood, this story. Oh, I'm going to do this. Which one are you in the story? We'd all love to say we're the premeditated murderer, adulterer David, because of these 2 scenarios. He's the best. But how many times are we Absalom? We're angry. We're fighting against God. We're rebellious on the inside and worshiping on the outside.
Come on.
Looking nice and pretty. Back in the palace, playing palace kid. Being nice. And then going outside when Dad's doing his work in there and going, hey, if I was king, you know what I would do? You know what I would do? You see, pride divides. It divided the kingdom. It divided Absalom and David. Was David the perfect dad? No. David should have handled situations way back when. He should have addressed it then. And he didn't. Because he didn't do his part, all of this brewed. Does that make Absalom off the hook? No. Just because your dad didn't handle the situation right, just because your boss doesn't handle the situation right, doesn't mean you get the plot, the murder, the assassination, and the rape of everybody in town and burn down houses and go cuckoo. It's not an excuse for you to act in sin because somebody did you wrong. Because somebody didn't do it the way you liked. It doesn't work that way. It worked till he was hung on a tree and they stabbed him to death. So what is the right response? Own your part of it. We all have a part in this story. You see, we'd always like to think we fall in one line. We're David. We're Absalom. We're this person. You see, what we have a tendency to do as Christians is we hop around. We're schizophrenics. You know, we'll be David for a little while, worshiping out with the sheep. And then we're back over there premeditating some thoughts and sin and doing this. And then we're bad dad, good dad. It's like, what are we going to be? I don't know what we're going to be. And as Christians, we float around in this and we premeditate this and I'm going to do this. But, oh, no, praise you, Jesus. No, I don't like this person. We can be as holy as we want, and then they come sit next to us and we turn into Absalom. We go from David to Absalom and so own your part of it. Own it. Lead with love. Follow love. Lead with humility. It's important to understand we are all messed up. There's nobody in here perfect. I know it. Some of y'all are starting to now premeditate about me. You just said I was not perfect. You're not. We're not perfect. We're not always right. And that's hard. You know what happens? Nobody likes to be told they're wrong. Tell somebody they're wrong and they will find 5 ways to figure out that they're kind of wrong. See, you're wrong. I'm only kind of wrong. We just do it. We don't like to be told we're wrong. We don't like to be corrected. Try to correct somebody. Nowadays, they pull out a gun and shoot you. If you tell them, hey, my light was... But we become that way because we hold this stuff in. Here's another one. Say you're sorry. Let's practice. Everybody say, I'm sorry. I accept y'all's prayers. Thank you. I know y'all are sorry. I know. Think about it though. It is so not in our nature to want to say, I'm sorry. I'm wrong. We want to justify. It goes back to the garden. What happened? Who did this? That beautiful gift you gave me. That thing you was ooglying and googlying over in the beginning, and you just loved it, couldn't think nothing about it. Now it's her fault. What did she say? It's them kids. The devil made me do it. That's right. The devil made me do it. Yeah, I guess, No. She did it. Trust God through the junk. This process of life and hurts and pains is not quick and easy. Sometimes it takes time. It is hard. Trust God. Trust God through the steps. Trust Him through the word we don't like to use, the process. Trust Him. Trust that those steps work. If I had a carpenter here and he gave me instructions to build a house, to do this, take the nails, and gave me the instructions on how to build a house, who would I be to go, I know you're a carpenter and I know you build houses for a living. I'm a Frito-Lay guy. I don't think you know what you're talking about. This looks like a whole lot of work. You want me to do what? I gotta wait then? I don't think you know what you're talking about. Who's ever gotten into something that they didn't know all the details till they got into it? Mm-hmm. And then realized, whoa, us men, we build something without the instructions and we can't figure out why we got 5 pieces left over and why it looks... Hey, hon, you still got them instructions? And we go back and look and go, okay, step 1. Oh, that's where I messed up. And I'm bad, I'm a picture guy. Give me the picture. I need to see the end result of the picture, and I'll figure it out. And well, what does it say? I don't know, but it looks like it goes this way. And then you go back and read, and it says you got to put this piece in there, because if you don't put this piece in there first, the next piece doesn't go in. And you can't see that in the picture. But you got to consult the instructions. And so God, when we're going through these seasons of junk and hurt and pain, and God says, I need you to do this piece. Well, I don't want this piece. I just want it all to be good and perfect and happy at the end. And can't I just fast forward to that part? And God's like, no, because if you do not do this part first, if you do not forgive and let go, it will tarnish and destroy, and you will not get this. I'm growing vegetables. I don't want the weeds to grow in there. I'm going to spray Roundup on them. Yeah, doesn't make sense, does it? Because it's going to kill the... Yeah, but I don't want weeds. Give it time. Say time. 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 Walk away from the microwave. Go to the oven. Okay? Now, I know somebody in here is going to balk on this. I'm not a baker. I know y'all don't know that. I'm not a baker. But I do know this. If I'm going to make a cake, I gotta get the right ingredients, the egg, the flour, some sugar, maybe some flavoring, a box mix, call the grocery store, is the cake ready? And if I take all that and I mix it properly and I do that step right, you pour it in the cake pan, right? You get it all smoothed out and you get up and I take the cake pan and, okay, I gotta preheat the oven. Preheat the oven, right, to 350? 350? That's. I'm doing pretty good. I'm fixing to lose you though, trust me. Preheat to 350, so people in my house might have baked a little bit. I think it's just a natural thing. Don't you preheat everything to 350? Is that the go-to amount? And then you get it, and you're going over, and you read the box, and it says 15, 20 minutes? 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, 20 to 30 minutes, and you're walking over, and you're going, God, that's a long time. 20 to 30 minutes. I mean, I want this cake now. And you look at it, and you think, that's a little sloshy. 30 minutes. And so you walk over there, okay, we gotta do it. And then you stop and you go to the microwave. And you put the cake in the microwave and you go, 5 minutes sounds good. Popcorn button. They don't have a cake button on the microwave, do they? It's kind of interesting. There's no make cake button. And so you just punch some buttons. 30 minutes there, we'll do 5 here. Beep. And you wait 5 minutes later, who's going to want to come eat cake at my house that I microwaved? Now, it might be able to be done. I'm not saying you can't do it. But would you rather have one 30 minutes at 350 in the oven, 5 minutes in the microwave? I think we all know which cake we want. We might try that. We're going to microwave cake, see what it looks like. When's the next family first? I'm bringing cake. I'm going to bring 2 and see if you can tell which one was oven and which one was microwaved. And if you're really hungry, you might just put the icing on it before. Yes. Things with God take time. We like to microwave life. We like it to be quick and easy. And sometimes there's nothing like just taking time. It just takes time. Say it just takes time. Just takes time. What is it? Wine is more expensive, and fine wine, I know nothing about wine, so here I am off jumping in wine. But the longer it goes, it's better, right? It's not yesterday wine, or it's, this is from 1901. Versus 15 minutes ago wine that I microwaved.
Oh.
I wonder if you can make wine. I'm going to go see what you can make in a microwave. I wonder if you can microwave wine. When are we doing communion next?
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm like, we're not in here drinking anything that he brings. That's why I don't cook at the house. The wrong response is where I can do it myself. I can fix this problem. I can fix it. I can do this. Absalom tried to fix the problem. He didn't trust God. I can't let it go. It's just too big of a deal. It's too big of an issue. I can't let this go. I can't be healed from this. There's no way I'm letting go. And last but not least, that we say quite frequently is, I'll never forgive. I'll never forgive what they did. I may not have to see them or be around them, but I'm not forgiving. And God is like, please. And the devil's like, yeah. Just put it over here in a compartment and just let it stew and brew. Don't forgive. Let's do it like everybody else. So what do you need healing from? You bow your heads, close your eyes this morning. What are you holding on to? What's holding you back? What hurt? You know, the one that we ignore and act like we're over it, that one. Because God today's saying it's time. It's time to let it go. Put it on the altar. Give it to me. Trust me. Because God's not going to be able to go any farther with us until we deal with it. And that's hard. And that's a process. And it can get ugly because when we have to start unpacking why. I can promise us this, there's a God on the other side holding healing and forgiveness and love. And if we just plug ourselves in and trust Him. So Father, this morning as we have looked at this tragic story, I ask that you would touch our hearts. That dark spot, the one we keep in the shadows, that we don't want anybody to know about, that hurt. Lord, I pray this morning that your Spirit would shine light in there. Not to expose it in a bad way, to expose it to heal it. Heal our hearts, heal our hurts. Let us let go and not hold